particular figure documented in the Bible, and this week my focus will be on the fall of Lucifer. Lucifer, as you may already know, is a spirit who goes by many names, including the name devil or Satan. In Latin, Lucifer actually means light bearer and is the name of the morning star. But did the word Lucifer always exist in the Bible? Historians and theologians will tell you it didn't. Ultimately, because the word Lucifer stems from the Latin word. So given that the Old Testament was actually written primarily in Hebrew, the word Lucifer could not have been in the Hebrew language. So how did the word Lucifer enter the Bible? The word entered the Bible because in 382, after the death of Christ, a pope called Damascus commissioned St. Jerome to write a revision of the old Latin translation of the Bible. By the 13th century, therefore, the term Lucifer was considered the common translation for the devil. It was actually St. Jerome, commissioned by the Pope Damascus, who placed the word Lucifer into the Bible, and not just once, but 3 times. In Isaiah 14:12, Job 11:17, and 2 Peter 1:19. Ultimately, however, the term morning star is used throughout the New Testament and is actually in reference to Jesus Christ. We can see that Christ in Revelations 22:16 is called the morning star, when Christ himself says, "I am the root and the offspring of David, and the bright and morning star." Signifying to me, therefore, that Jesus is a true light bearer and Satan is a false light bearer with his false messages and doctrines. If we are, however, to go with the term Lucifer to describe Satan, it ultimately has to be said that Lucifer may have been cast down from heaven, but he has not been cast out of heaven, since he can still plead his case before God day and night against mankind. And we can see that as it says in Revelations chapter 12 verse 10. The use of the name Lucifer for the devil stems from a particular interpretation of Isaiah 14:3 to 20, a passage that does not speak directly of any fallen angel, but the defeat of a particular Babylonian king, whom in the passage is named Hallel, Shining One, a Hebrew word that refers to the day star or morning star. In fact, only Revelations more directly refers to Lucifer or Satan in the Bible as being the fallen angel. Revelations 12:9 talks about future events. It states that the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. He was cast into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Lucifer, therefore, has been cast down from heaven, like Nephilims, who were sons of God who forsook their place in heaven and came to earth to have sexual relations with the daughters of men, and we find this in Genesis chapter 6 verse 4. However, as Revelations foretells at 12:9, Lucifer will finally be cast out to the extent that he will not be able to continue pleading his case before God day and night against mankind. And as I referred to earlier, this is in Revelations chapter 12 verse 10. Perhaps, however, for me to illustrate my point on Lucifer as the adversary and Lucifer's role is perhaps to refer to the story of Job in the Bible. With the case of Job, there was, if you like, this meeting in heaven where the sons of God came to God and Satan came amongst them. And we can see this at Job chapter 1 verse 6. All of them, of course, having rights of audience to plead their case before God about the condition of man. Now Lucifer presented his case to God that there was not a single honourable man amongst men, and God cited the example of Job, who Satan said at chapter 1 verse 9 of the book of Job that he was only devoted to God and lived in a godlike manner because of all the material blessings that God had given Job. God, at verse 12 of chapter 1 of Job, then took the decision to grant Satan leave to do anything he wanted with Job, but to spare him his life. Lucifer then put Job through a series of tests which is documented throughout most of the remaining chapter of the book of Job, and Job passed the test by still believing in God and submitting to God's spiritual nature despite all that he had lost physically and mentally. Job eventually gained double for his trouble in chapter 42 of the book of Job, and his cases strengthened God's belief that mankind is capable of choosing spiritual enlightenment and practices over fleshly desires. Ultimately, because during Job's tests, he refused to curse God when he was encouraged to do so by Satan. Ultimately, therefore, we have free will to control our destinies, and it is hoped, during the course of our lifetime, become enlightened enough to acknowledge our Creator who made us in the first place. Acknowledge our Creator by worshipping, praying, and living in alignment with his spiritual kingdom. Lucifer, however, as you'll probably accept, has a host of ways to tempt people depending on what position one finds themselves in. For those who are successful, he tempts them on the basis of their success, convincing them they don't need God. If, however, you fall into another camp, with your pain and suffering, for instance, his ultimate aim is to convince you with thoughts, devices, and examples of how God cannot be with you, that God cannot care for you. Ultimately, however, churchgoers go to church screaming that Lucifer is the adversary, not fully appreciating what the role of the adversary is. The dictionary's definition of adversary is a person or group that is hostile to someone, an opponent or an enemy. As an adversary, however, Lucifer uses various devices to persuade you of all the things that you can accomplish in your own might, and this is done by Lucifer in order to ultimately steal your soul and deny your soul a safe passage home when you physically die. Even the adverts that surround us try to convince us of all this power we supposedly have as supposed masters of the universe. From slogans such as "power to you" to online webmail adverts that try to snare you with phrases such as "there is a new digital master of the universe and it is you." Lucifer's bag of tricks ultimately varies, however, just like the different legal systems that exist in different countries. For instance, the legal system in Ghana can be described as adversarial because the lawyer on the other side is your opponent, whereas in England, the legal system is considered non-adversarial because, as a lawyer, the lawyer on the other side is not your opponent. He's your learned friend that you don't have to be hostile towards, but you can still win your case by being subtle and having the appearance of civility, all the while being strategic but cunning in your examination and delivery of the evidence. Lucifer, or Satan, has, however, been the adversary since the beginning of our time. That's why Job 1 from verses 9 to 11 states, "Then Satan answered the Lord, Job, fear God for nothing. Hast thou not made a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But put forth your hand, and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse thee to thy face."
You are listening to our Father's House broadcast with Amanda Clinton. Email your views about the show to
ourfathershouseghana@yahoo.com.
You can also watch us on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/Our Father's House Ghana. Look out for Our Father's House books and CDs in Accra, and our latest book, How I Sold My Soul by Amanda Clinton, is about a man's spiritual journey from living in the world as an Illuminati to entering God's world.
Although Lucifer was not allowed to remove the hedge or God-ordained protection around Job temporarily, or that he was allowed to remove the hedge, God-ordained protection around Job temporarily, the most important part of the story of Job to me is that the passage the sons of God came before God, and Satan came amongst them, as it states at Job 1:6. It speaks to me because it says that Lucifer still has rights of audience to speak in God's spiritual court, as it states in Job 1. But as Revelations 12:9 further reveals, Satan will be cast out for good, and is spending his time until then trying to steal as many souls from God, preferring that you and I are not with God, separated from God, since we don't seem to appreciate the gift of life, don't seem to appreciate the gift of being a soul operating in flesh, the gift that we can connect to our Creator by praying, talking and fasting, and submitting to His order, as laid down in His book. But ultimately, most of us choose not to take up this challenge. As such, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Jesus has come that we might have life and have it to the full, and this is at John chapter 10 verse 10. We can see the nature of the adversary with how the devil tried to tempt Jesus. Jesus' first temptation is illustrated at Matthew 4 from verse 1 to 4, which quite simply states that then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he then became hungry, and the tempter came and said to him, "If you're the Son of Man, or the Son of God, command that these stones become bread." But Jesus answered and said, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God." Jesus responded, in essence, or his response, in essence, should I say, comes from Deuteronomy 8. God indicates through Moses that he purposely led Israel into the wilderness and let them hunger and thirst so that they would learn that men live by God's word and their obedience to it, not just by eating physical bread. In terms of illustrating the adversary's role, we can also see that Jesus was tempted by the adversary for the second time, and this was at Matthew 4 from verse 5 to 8. Matthew 4, 5 to 8 states that, "Then Lucifer took him into the holy city, and he had him stand on the pinnacle of the temple. And he said to him, 'If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will give His angels charge concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone.' Jesus said to him, 'On the other hand, it is written, You shall not put the Lord your God to the test.'" Lucifer seeks to intensify the temptations of our Lord by challenging Jesus to wrongly apply a biblical promise of protection. God has, however, promised that His angels will protect His sons, and especially His Son Jesus, from harm. If this promise is true, and if Jesus is truly the Messiah, which He is, then let Him put God to the test. Let Jesus cast Himself down from the pinnacle of the temple, and then God must act to save Him. Let Him put Himself in a situation where suffering is inevitable, and then God must save Him. Men, however, are not to put God to the test. Not to put God to the test to force Him to come to the rescue or to do their bidding. Such an action is not to be done because God should be the cause of our actions, and man should not become the cause of God's action. A third illustration perhaps comes from the third temptation that Jesus had, and this is at Matthew 4, 8 to 11. Again, Lucifer took him into a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, "All these things will I give to you, if you fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Be gone, Satan, for it is written, You shall worship the Lord your God and serve Him." Then Lucifer left him, and behold, angels came and began to minister to Jesus. The first two temptations, therefore, were primarily about suffering, and the third is about glory. Ultimately, however, it is interesting to me that Jesus officially started His ministry when He passed the tests of being tempted by the devil, but still persevering. Jesus' ministry officially starts from Matthew